A lot of you may have been reading my comments in the chat box that black holes and the theory of the Big Bang are essentially bunk. The concept, just to clarify on this point, the event horizon, it's stated by black hole and Big Bang theory that as you approach the event horizon, as you approach the point of maximum density, that time essentially comes to a standstill. This is all well and good, but unfortunately, if you try to conceive of an event that transects time 0 to time 1 is the easiest way of conceiving of it. So going from no time to time, essentially they complicate this by thinking about it backwards, as if you're going from time to no time as you approach the black hole, or as you approach the moment of Big Bang. Essentially, you couldn't approach time from no time. You would get no closer. If you're in no time, you move to nowhere, time-wise. So there is no way of transecting time as a boundary in that respect. So that essentially makes a nonsense of the entire concept of the Big Bang and of black holes. I'm not suggesting that there aren't huge areas of the galaxy and the universe that may be filled with such vast masses that you begin to see space being more or less twisted, and yes, so you would have essentially twisted into something approaching a donut shape, where essentially there would be no middle. Again, it's very difficult to wrap your head around some of these shapes, because essentially what you're talking about with a donut shape is a torus, and a torus is what's known as a hyperdimensional sphere. So if you can imagine a ball and then imply an extra dimension that you cannot see, then you end up with a torus, you end up with a donut. Yeah, so essentially we write off the concept of black holes, but we keep the areas of spatial gravitational depression that give us all of the results that we see from black holes, the lensing of stars, when a black hole-like object passes in front of another star, then we can actually see 4 versions of the star as the light is bent around the massive spatial object. Again, it's possibly a bit picky to say, well, there's no such thing as a black hole, because there are essentially things that are resembling black holes that are black hole-like all over the galaxy, so all over the universe even. So it would probably be foolish to dispute some of the mathematics there. But the problem comes where you start to talk about an event horizon. Now, again, if you actually apply the idea of hyperspace to the hyperdimensional sphere, which becomes a torus, the magical thing about a torus is that it allows for energy to pass in a straight line through a hyperdimension. And as energy passes in a straight line through the hyperdimension, it describes a perfect spiral, and that spiral travels in a circular path, which describes the torus, the donut shape. So it would be possible to be caught up in a very similar way to the way that being caught by a black hole is described by conventional science, and be essentially perpetually propelled around this eternal kind of spiral around the donut, around this very dense area of space. But it's just as likely that you would be bounced off, or taken. If you were to hit it tangentially, you may well be accelerated and flung off in a completely different direction rather than being sucked in as such. So we have a gravitational mass at the centre of the galaxy, which is the coalescent force, around which the galaxy has condensed out of its cloud of gas. We might as well call that object a supermassive black hole. That's the current model in science. Like I say, it could be potentially a little picky, questioning about the actual nature of black holes, because they are such extreme objects that it is probably possibly even beyond our abilities to consider their true nature. Bearing in mind that as well, there is again science that backs this up there are certain black hole-like objects that eject plasma jets from their toroidal centre, and these plasma jets are in fact most likely being thrown off in exactly the manner that I was just describing, where particles and matter are drawn in by this huge gravitational source, lensed by the donut, and then ejected along the common centre of the donut. So you could, I mean, you have black holes ejecting as much matter into space as they are consuming. So it's hard to say where the boundary lies there. But essentially, we have this huge gravitational mass at the centre of our galaxy, around which all of the stars coalesce. They form a ball at the centre of the galaxy around this, the galactic centre. I believe it's about 1/10 of the overall diameter of the galaxy. I could stand to be corrected there. And the galactic disk then spreads out along a galactic equator. This is caused by the rotation of the central body of the galaxy around its supermassive black hole, and that this rotation causes the galaxy to flatten out into a disk with the two traditional spiral arm shapes. Now, essentially, people are saying that the galactic equator, the galactic horizon, is an event that's simply a matter of our observational stance on Earth. I also believed that for quite some time, but I've actually found more evidence now that's stacking up to say that the solar system itself has an ecliptic path, that is a path that's at a tangent to its direction in its rotation around the galaxy. If you consider the solar system's rotation in our part of the spiral arm as a circular orbit, then on that circular orbit we have another circular orbit, that the solar system doesn't remain static on that orbit. It actually cycles around a common centre line, probably still being slowly tamed by this same force that creates the disk in the first place, and that the solar system hasn't quite settled down into a central plane yet. It cycles above and below the central plane. Now, on this cyclic path, we cross over the galactic horizon approximately every 11 or 12,000 years. This is, funnily enough, borne out by the swapping of the poles in approximately the same frequency, and this is measured by the north and south poles being shown to having swapped places approximately every 11,000 years in the volcanic record on the Mid-Atlantic Rift. So essentially, what we're possibly seeing there is that if you can imagine the galaxy as this huge rotating mass with a gravitational disk, where the maximum star density is primarily along the disk plane, and that we cross from away from that plane, across the disk, across the plane, and back away from the plane again on a 24,000 year cycle. Now, this means that every 11,000 years or so, every 11 or 12,000 years or so, we cross from what I would like to describe as clockwise space into anti-clockwise space. As we cross the equatorial, the galactic equatorial region, that the spin of the subspace of the ether is reversed. That if you look into the actions of force fields in the presence of a toroidal magnet, you will see that the energy fields are lensed by the toroidal field and are sucked into a narrow band in the centre and are drawn, much like the Earth's magnetic field, into a huge donut shape again. Now, because of the rotation of the galaxy, we possibly have two donuts where you have an above and below because of this centre line, which would essentially mean that they would be counter-rotating toroidal energy fields, which would squash all of the high-energy particles gushing about in the universe into a narrow band, which would occupy, again, this equatorial region, and also the ejector region, which would be at the sort of polar line running through the galaxy, where there's probably as much material being ejected out from the centre of the galaxy as there is being absorbed in at the regions. So essentially we have this huge rotating mass, of which we are crossing over a line of force and changing from a direction of force that had a particular direction of rotation to the subspace. It's my belief that we're actually going through an intermediate period of space, much like when you travel from the North Pole to the South Pole, the Coriolis effect at the equator becomes indeterminate. So that's the effect that makes the water spin a particular way down your plug hole. When you try that at the equator, you've only got to impart a small amount of spin in the other direction, and you'll see that it goes down quite happily, go the other way around. I'm very sorry, Paddy. Are you struggling to keep up? Would you like me to simplify a little? It's very difficult with these sort of subjects. If there's one part that you particularly don't understand, please ask, and I'll quite happily explain in as simplistic language as possible. But with these subjects, they're very, very dense, and the considerations are quite sort of broad-reaching. So it's very hard to kind of stay within layman's language and express it in any kind of meaningful sense in any meaningful time. So essentially what we have is this intermediate area of space that we're travelling through at the moment, which is indicated by the pole shifts that we're seeing at the moment, and the intermittent appearance of north and south poles in the wrong hemisphere. Currently there are dozens of fairly large areas of the north and south hemisphere that have exactly the wrong polar alignment. So if you're travelling through that region on a ship, if you're not using GPS, if you're using the old compass, the compass will swing and point the opposite way as you travel across that bit of the ocean. Many of the runways around the world have had to be renumbered because they're numbered in their number of degrees from north. And several major runways of international airports now have had to be completely renumbered recently because of the polar shift. The polar drift is running at an extreme rate. I think we've actually seen something like a 40 mile shift in the last decade, which is pretty unprecedented in human history. And like I say, these north and south poles are popping up all over the place. But like I say, this is all natural. You know what I mean? We've been around for 4 billion years. We're going to be around through this cycle. We're going to be around through several million more cycles like this, no doubt. So this isn't anything to be particularly worried about, and especially in this day and age with things like GPS positioning, where our international transport is no longer reliant on the magnetic compass. The polar reversal may in fact almost completely unaffect us, a bit like the millennium bug, Y2K issue, that on paper it all looked very hideous and very scary, but I don't actually remember any planes falling out of the sky or any bank computers crashing and being incapable of restarting and losing everybody's money on January the 1st, 2000. So, there's a lot of fear-mongering about, and I think that we all need to be very careful of anything that falls into the fear agenda.